Well, it's Friday morning, more or less 10. I don't know. I'm a little bit late today. I got down here on time and started things early, but then I started reading something and lost track of the time. Um, Actually, I should read this thing to you. Read it on the stream so that you can hear it. It's the Apollo story. Originally copyrighted in 1969, just after the Apollo 11 mission, and it's actually kind of fascinating. Um, just in what's fascinating about is some of the illustrations, but also the language that's used. You can, I mean, it uses really big words like determination and stuff. I'll just say that because this is old curmudgeon complaining about newfangled things week. So one of the things I can complain about the newfangled things is the reduction in words. Okay, the reduction in the size of words. So I can since I'm an old curmudgeon, I can do this. It's okay. I can complain about why we don't use long words anymore. And in fact, even words that aren't all that long, like relationship, okay, are reduced to one syllable. I keep hearing that over and over again. It's just like all the syllables are gone but one. So we used to, when we were like in our 30s or something, we said, well, in order for these people to understand what we're saying, we have to talk in 1 and 2 syllable words. Don't use any words more than 2 syllables. Well, apparently that's really caught on, and even words that used to be more than 2 syllables are now reduced to 1 syllable. Anyway, this is written in fairly dramatic language. It's kind of fun to read because of that kind of language. And also sometimes there's references to technology in it that's why I was browsing this. The just references to certain things that make it kind of funny right now when you begin to realize just how primitive things were compared to the way they are now in terms of size and weight and lack of processing power. Anyway, this book is really kind of, this little booklet is really kind of fun. And it might be fun to read this at some point. It's interesting. It's this mix of dramatic language and all sorts of little facts and figures that just go on and on. That are kind of interesting, but not, but maybe not essential. It just seems like there's excessive. Um, I'm just reading it as I'm talking. Just reading it as I'm talking. Anyway, yeah, I think that, instead of doing something on the model, if at some point I just like hit a gap where I can't do something, or I just get too tired, or lose focus, or just don't feel like it, I can do that too because I'm an old curmudgeon, and I just don't feel like it. I can read this. So maybe I'll do that. Maybe not today. I can just show it to you. I'll flip through it to show you some of the pictures like that. There's the blast off picture. They couldn't use like a real photograph, I guess. So they did an artist conception. It's parts of this, it's really weird. Parts of this appear to be written before the mission. Some of it was written, at least the introduction was written after the mission because it makes reference to the July 20th landing. Okay. But then the type font changes partway through. And then they start using the future tense instead of the present tense. And it's like here, all of a sudden the type font changed. You can see the like distance the distance between the lines, all of a sudden they get bigger. So, yeah, I think like part of this was written earlier, starting maybe here, and then the rest of it was written later. Yeah, and then the after Apollo part, that's pretty funny. The after Apollo part is kind of interesting as well. But anyway, yeah, I'm kind of skimming this. I think it would be fun to read this. Maybe I'll just take an entire stream sometime in the future after I make some more progress on the model and just read this, because it's kind of entertaining. Look back at the history of this and how it was described at the time. But I am working on this. This is the Apollo spacecraft. Okay, and the way they describe it in the Apollo story is that this entire thing is the Apollo, and that includes the fairing. I was reading that, which is why I was a little bit late getting started. This section here is called the fairing, which is the container for the lunar excursion module, the LEM, the descent and ascent stages, and the support for the service, command, and escape tower modules. And as far as the model goes, I've got the escape tower done, and I've got the service module done. I'd say it is done, but there's one part of it, that one of the external shells, that probably needs to be reattached at some point. It's being held on by friction. Right now, the cement didn't hold as well, and I have to decide whether to cement it on or not. I've got the parts for the fairing done. The paint that I was waiting for, that I thought would show up on Monday, showed up actually yesterday. So I was able to paint the hinge connectors here. I'm not sure I'm going to get around to constructing this today, because I've got other things to do that I worked on Wednesday, anticipating that the paint wouldn't show up until Monday. But I've got these pretty much ready to go. But if it's the second half of the stream, anyway, you've seen this before. I tend to get a little bit tired and lose focus a little bit as I get into the last 25 minutes or so of the stream. And the construction of this, it looks really simple. It's like you put the hinge retainer on the big circular thing and hold it in place, but it's not going to be that simple, because the mechanism is kind of, it isn't really smooth working. It's pretty well designed. I mean, it works. I've tested it. But there's also pressure pushing the part that holds the hinge onto the fairing base. The pressure is to push it away, which would mean that it could pop off pretty easily. So that means that it needs to be very, very securely fastened. And there's no good way to clamp it. It's just too big, and I can't, and because of the way this part is attached, okay, it folds down, I can't get a clamp on it this way or that way or anything. So I have to like hold it in place with my fingers for maybe 2 or 3 minutes. And that will be fun to watch. It's almost going to be like as exciting as watching paint dry, or yeah, almost as exciting as watching paint dry on the stream. Or as they say, watching grass grow. It might be less exciting than watching grass grow. So anyway, what I'm talking about is something that I will get to, but the parts are ready. What I have done so far, though, is I found the pieces of the astronaut figures. And those are in a box over there that I will be pulling forward fairly soon. They include a standing astronaut who goes inside the Lunar Excursion Module. Okay. It includes 3 sitting astronauts who go inside the command module, like that. Okay. And it includes a standing on the moon astronaut that is pictured here, the one that has the backpack. So each of those was molded in halves, front and back. The front and back halves did not match up all that well. There were gaps between the front and the back, even when they were matched. So I pretty liberally cemented the edges all the way around. And as you'll see in a bit, attached enough little clamps to the things to make it look like the astronauts were in some sort of torture device. This is a good picture. This shows the entirety of what I'm working on. So this is the bit that's done, the escape tower and the service module. Okay. And the fairing that I'm working on is down here. And when these pedals are hinged up, they enclose the Lunar Excursion Module and support the rest of this. And this is the command module, and I'll be doing that last. One of the reasons I'm doing the command module last is because the instrument panel has very, very shallow embossing of what the instruments are supposed to look like. So I did research. I did some research yesterday, and not last couple of days, just one couple day yesterday, about how these things actually looked. One thing I did was I got pictures of the moon suit. Okay, so here, I'll show you that. So this guy here, the Neil Armstrong guy, right, with the backpack and all. This is a picture of the very actual Neil Armstrong moon suit. And as it turns out, the painting instructions for the moon suit, other than to say paint it white, which is true for almost all of it, they're just not right. And the model has these kind of like straps on it. And you might see those later. And it says paint them light blue, but there's nothing here that's painted light blue. What there are, though, are there very brightly colored blue and red connectors for heating and cooling and life support connections. Okay. And then the gloves are not white. They're kind of a light gray color. The visor is gold plated, though. So they've got that right. And the model doesn't say anything about the NASA patch and the little flag patch or the mission patch. So it's like, I don't know. I'm going to do my best. I'm going to do my best to, and the moon shoes are gray on the bottom too. Okay. I'm going to do my best to maybe try to get it to look more authentic than the painting instructions say. So that would be kind of an interesting minifig thing. I'll have to look at the detail that they actually molded into the model. This is just a description of, this is the moon walking suit. Okay. The sitting in the command module suit is a little bit less bulky. It's similar though. It says it had a TSLA, which was an acronym for, I can't remember what it meant. It's similar, but it has only 3 connections instead of 6. They're not duplicated on both sides like that. It's just on one side. And other than that, it's pretty much the same. Nice, it's got a sunglasses pocket on it. That's a feature that shirts should have now when you're outside. Anyway, it's the intravehicular pressure garment, right? As opposed to the extravehicular pressure garment. And then they changed it later on one of the later flights, and the major change is where all the connectors are located on the chest of the suit. So when I pull out the astronaut figures, we will all have to discover together whether they replicated this at all, or whether they did a later suit. It might not be anything like that at all. The other thing is with the command module and the lunar module is I complained about the lack of detail on the molding process for the instrument panels. And so I got some pictures. This is the lunar excursion module instrument panel. A picture of the real thing and then kind of a schematic of it. The way the model is put together, these windows are actually there, so you'll be able to see the standing astronaut figure who's standing in front of the instrument panel. But I don't think it will be possible. Of course, this is upside down and you can't even tell, right? There you go. I don't think it would be possible to see any of the instrument panels, so I'm not sure how much I need to be worried about the detail of it. But the command module instrument panel, well, that's another story altogether. Let's say it's not simple, is it? No. This is kind of a graphics picture of it. And then this is a photo of the real thing. The painting instructions for this whole thing are to paint the whole inside light blue. And it looks like, in fact, it was light blue. Okay. But the seats, which are really kind of poorly molded, they don't have the detail. The actual seats, it looks like, were just kind of like canvas. They're like lawn chairs. They're like canvas attached to a tube frame. I suppose it, during launch, it made a difference because they had like 4 or 5 Gs, 4 to 5 times the force of gravity, because the Saturn V pushed pretty hard. But I suppose, once you were up in space, I think they actually folded some of these up so there was some room to move around, because it's pretty cramped inside the command module. But yeah, it was good to see that something is actually light blue, but the detail in the model doesn't come anywhere close to reality. So I'm going to have to make some decisions about how to paint it. Because you'll be able to see the detail through these little windows, which actually show up in the model, and the hatch, which opens. And then I took a picture of the hatch. Okay. All this stuff is not visible on the model. There's like a couple of pieces here and then the ring around the window. And I wanted to see what that looked like because the painting instructions say paint it light blue. And I did suspect that there was more to it than everything was painted light blue. And it is true. There's all sorts of little, it is, there's a lot of latches, okay, that are controlled by a handle. So the hatch is a tiny little piece that I stored inside here. That's where it's supposed to be. Hopefully I'll find it again. That's another story, right? A little bit of this detail is visible. So I think because the hatch swings open, not on really nice heavy duty metal hinges like this, but on little plastic pins, the model, right? I'm going to paint as much of this as accurately as I can, given what is actually present on of course the hatch isn't in here. Duh. The hatch is for the command module, and I have the pieces for the lunar module. So the command module hatch would not be in here. It will be in that box over there. Anyway, I don't know how much of the detail of this control panel I'm going to try to duplicate. The embossing on the model doesn't really match this very well. Okay. So I don't know. I'll try to get it as much of it as I can. That's all I can say. And if it doesn't work, then what I'll do is prime it again and repaint it. But the painting instructions just say paint it all light blue. And obviously there's more to it than that. So how much time? I've almost used a half hour up. That's good. That's usually how much time I spend chatting about things. What I have under here, under these paper towels, are the parts for the lunar module. And I'm going to start working on cleaning these up. Okay, because they have like here, you got a little flashing left over from the molding process. You've got the connector thing where it was connected to the tree or to the sprue. Okay, you've got got a little circular thing here, which is a molding flaw. There's flashing all around there. That isn't supposed to be there because it's not part of the lunar module. You've got a thing here that looks like flashing, but is part of the lunar module that I have to be careful not to file off. Clean the rest of this up. And this is the other half of it. And then I'll test fit this. And what I'm going to find is, as with most of these parts, they leave a pretty noticeable seam, which I am going to very carefully sand out later before I paint this entire thing. Yeah, this compared to some of the other parts actually fits together pretty well. Anyway, you can see these are the face of the LEM. It actually looked like it had a face with these windows looking like eyes. And there is an astronaut figure that will be inserted inside of this, like there. Okay, it's supposed to stand there. And I will put that guy in there before I enclose him. Yeah. So there's a circular, there's an indentation there. I'm going to have to try to fill that in. Yeah. I mean, this is just injection molded and not in a way that was particularly careful in terms of its tolerances. Like down here, I'm just looking at this about the challenges that this will face. Like there, that leaves a gap. Okay, that little thing there doesn't fill the gap, and so I'll probably fill that in. I'm not a master modeler by any means, but I can see obvious flaws and make some effort to correct them. So, like, besides just making sure that these seams don't show later, so I want to make sure that the little excess plastic or the two sides don't line up perfectly, and they don't ever. Like that little dimple there. If you can see it if the light catches it. See it right there. This little indentation that shouldn't be there. I'll fill that in. It will still show because the filler I have will not match the surface texture of the rest of the model. It won't match it perfectly. And so it'll still show a little bit as like a little, maybe a change in the reflectivity of the paint that I put on it. But it won't show as a divot. So part of this is, getting the seams all to go away. Maybe are those intentional? Oh, I thought those were like where the sprue was. Good thing I'm playing with this. Those are in fact intentional little extensions. Huh, weird. Boy, I almost messed up. That would have been a really bad mess up if I had messed that up. But fortunately, I didn't mess it up because I'm playing with this beforehand. Yeah. So what I'm hoping is that when I have to cement the windows in and cement the astronaut figure in, and I'm hoping that once I do that and I start moving this around, they don't fall out, because I'll be, a lot of steps. These get cemented together, and then there's going to be a bunch of sanding to get rid of the seams that are showing. And it's really bad here. They do not line up, the two halves. You can see the seam there. It's a really strong thing. So I'll be sanding it and then priming it, that means a fair amount of rotation, right? And then doing maybe some touch-up surface prep again, and then painting it, which will involve more rotation, probably a second coat. And if those pieces fall out, that's a disaster. So the windows especially need to be very securely fastened. The astronaut figure, this might be one of those surgical procedures that can actually work, but I'm not sure. I think there's a hatch here, the adapter hatch that goes between this and the command module docking station. Yeah, I mean, it might be theoretically possible to insert the astronaut down in there with like tweezers and attach it to the bottom, but I don't know. Maybe I'll avoid this by not. Oh my. Yeah, this is just. It would be really nice if I could paint these separately, put them together, and know they would work, but I can't paint this until it's together. But I'm just a concern, okay, is I attach the windows, right? But then I have to mask the windows really carefully for both the priming and the second coat. But that means applying some pressure onto them, which means pushing them away from the thing to which they're attached. And so unless that's really like solid in terms of its adhesion, I could pop the windows out. Well, clearly the thing to do there then is, this one solution is to, I'll probably put a glove on or something so I don't get fingerprints on the windows, is to just mask them before putting this together. So then I'll be pulling the tape away. Hopefully the masking will hold up to the two or three stage priming painting process. And the other thing I hope is that I won't keep poking at them with my finger, because I have this habit of when rotating something, grabbing it where I don't want to and then knocking something apart. Other than, the cosmetics part, which involves, a lot of little detail. These are brackets for the reaction control rockets. Okay, that's kind of annoying little detail stuff. No, that's where it was attached to the sprue. There and here. Okay. That's what needs to be filed off. Definitely don't file those off. These little tiny things. If you'd been watching this stream at all, you would have seen that there was a similar set of 16 of these that attach to the outside of the service module. And they come off the screw. They're connected, of course, in two sides, which means that there's little pokey bits hanging out instead of it being nice and clean. So those all need to be sanded off without affecting the roundness of each of these. And then once that's done, they need to be, I didn't bother priming them because they would just go flying. Okay. The spray paint would just blow them away. So I don't know. I might try priming these. I can put them on double-sided sticky tape. But then I paint these. So I've got these little dowels that I've saved from the ones from the service module. Let's see if they still fit these. They should be the same. And a little dowel that goes into the jet nozzle. So I can paint the outside a dark metallic color. And then once that dries, I can hold on to it and paint the inside of the nozzle black. And then these little brackets, are a pain as well. They come in halves. The halves don't match up all that well, and it shows seams, and then those seams need to be sanded down because they, the way these are attached, the seams protrude. You can see them very clearly. There are some other little bits that hang on to the outside of the ascent stage. There's some antenna and things, but not very many. Most of the fiddly bits are in the descent stage, where you've got the very delicate pieces here of the landing struts. And the landing struts hinge so that they fold up when they're inside the fairing. They fold up and then they extend. And the model is actually set up so that they will do that you can fold them, put the thing inside the fairing, and when you take it apart so that you can show these different pieces off separately, then they're supposed to fold out, and they're supposed to fold out in a way that doesn't break. There's like 3 pieces that come together on the hinge. The picture looks pretty complicated. So when it comes time to work on the descent stage, a fair amount of time is going to be testing and test fitting the hinges. Okay, so I think I've got a solution to the window issue here by putting the windows in and then masking them before I assemble. I'm not sure what to do with the astronaut figure. I really don't know. I can see, though, that they didn't bother with any of the interior detail. There's none of the interior detail that is molded in. So if you look through the windows, when you're looking through the windows when the model's put together, all you might see is the astronaut standing behind one of the windows, if I can get it to be affixed. I think the inside of this is painted light blue as well. Have to look at the painting instruction. Yeah, okay. I've got those kind of fingers today, the dropping things fingers. Let me see. It's a lot more fun talking about what I might be doing than it is to actually do it. The inside is supposed to be painted G. G is light blue. Fortunately, I have found some light blue paint that will work. So all you're going to see is the light blue. Anyway, this is most of the parts. In here are just little extra parts, most of which are part of the landing struts for the descent stage. A few things of which there's some antenna, like I said, that go onto the outside of the lunar module. But maybe later in the street, I'll start cleaning these things up. But for now, I'm going to set these aside, get off camera just for a little bit while I set them aside. Down again, sigh. It's important when you're an old curmudgeon to sigh. I'm not sure why that is exactly. Okay, this parts container I'll just leave here. Hopefully I'll remember where I left it, right? Yeah, that's the Apollo story thing. This is a thing I'm going to read where I can complain about everybody only speaking in single syllables nowadays. Because many of the words in here have 4 or 5 syllables. And then, people used to talk that way and write that way. In here, if I open this, what you'll see is 5 astronaut figures covered in clamps. And it does indeed. It looks like each one has like 6 different clamps on it, in an effort to hold the pieces tightly together so that the cement would fill the seams, or so that the seam would be closed. So the thing that will happen now is I'm going to start unclamping them, and then I am going to use some sandpaper and a nicely shaped sanding block thing. Hi, I am doing pretty well today. I have managed to fill almost 45 minutes of time without actually doing anything, which has been pretty fun. But I am about to unclamp these astronaut figures that I cemented together on Wednesday, and then we'll be spending, for better or worse, I'll be spending a fair amount of time sanding down the seams, because the seams on their front and back, right? Front and back figures, and the seams show. Oh, I unclamped its head. This is the one that sits inside the lunar excursion module. So it's got its moon suit on with the gold visor. Oh, campaign planning. That's a lot more fun. I mean, reading a book can be nice and relaxing, kind of like this stream is supposed to be, but maybe sometimes isn't. But campaign planning, definitely. I hope I didn't give you bad advice. Okay. Well, this is mostly okay, except that there's, for a reason unknown, a huge gap on its left foot. Its left foot did not come together at all. It's really bad. Wow, that's unexpected. The right foot is not too bad, but the left foot is close to disaster. So this particular figure, if it's used at all, is supposed to stand inside the lunar excursion module, in which case that foot would not be seen, but I don't know. That's going to require some surgery. These 3 guys are sitting in the command module. They are actually going to be able to see them pretty well through the hatch. When the hatch is opened, its right leg has some serious seam issues. The seam is closed, okay, but there's a lot of like flashing and stuff on it, so I'll be able to clean that up. The I don't know. It looks like this one's just got a lot of sanding work to be done. I don't know how these figures are going to turn out. What I really should do, oh, this is kind of interesting. I'm just looking at the detail on the front of the sitting astronauts, and they're not historically accurate. Okay. I don't know if you can see it, but there are like these little protrusions here on either side. Okay. There's three on each side. Well, actually, in this case, there's three on one side and two on the other. The people who were sitting inside the command module only had them on one side, at least on the early missions. The moon suit is horribly inaccurate, and it doesn't have any of the connectors showing at all. Should do what I really should have happen here, but it will take way too much time and it'll be almost to the point of being silly to do it. Would to be like do a 3D scan of these things and print much better ones off on our rosin printer. Yeah, I mean, it is. It's almost tempting to abandon these. Its foot did not come together. I'm going to have to just re-cement that. I'm looking at the detail on the front of this, and this moon suit is not historically accurate, just not at all. So I'm not sure what to do about it. The pieces came together pretty well, except for the feet. The feet were just molded in weird, stupid ways. This foot will not close. I'm going to have to fill that in. This foot will. I'm going to cement that and clamp it. And that'll dry while I work on the rest of these. I'm really kind of tempted to abandon these astronaut figures. But the ones that are sitting inside the command module really should be done. The standing guy, I don't know. I'm not sure if I can salvage this one inside the lunar excursion module, but these three sitting ones will really do need to go into the command module because the couches that they sit in are so badly done, so badly molded that it would just look awful unless they were sitting in them. And they've got their little faces there, inside the helmet. These aren't that bad. They just need a lot of cleaning up. But let me see if I can get this guy's foot together. Let's need one of these clamps. Standing on the moon one, I think I'm going to try to make it look as good as I can, because there's actually a moon base stand that came with the model that's supposed to be painted. It doesn't look very moony at all, really. It looks like a fake moon. That looks very much like a fake moon, but that, this is a model. It's not the real thing. Just to see if the cement is going to come out or not. Yep, it does. Okay. So the cement, make sure I'm getting it in the right place. Yeah, I'm trying to put this foot together. I'm just going to put some cement on here, bottom, I think. The instructions in a book I once read about modeling said apply liquid cement to the seam and that capillary action. You carry it into where you want, and I have done that, and it actually works. I was actually surprised that it actually worked. Okay, the problem here, the problem here is that when you look at the feet, if this thing gets put in all the way where it is supposed to go, the foot is unnaturally narrow. Okay, these are not the best formed astronaut figures. So I'm going to clamp this. Clamp it all the way like that, because then the foot looks really unnatural. But if I make it look so like the foot is not unnaturally skinny, then it has a gap that needs to be filled. If there's any sort of compromise that can be reached here. There will be a gap I need to fill in, no matter what I do. But instead of clamping it, I'm just going to hold it for a little bit. You can see there's a hole where the hole near his toe here. I'm just going to hold this here for a couple minutes. Why not? So I've been doing curmudgeon rants about newfangled gizmos this week. I have ranted about self-driving cars. That was my favorite rant. I'd almost like to repeat it, because immense amounts of money, the car manufacturers themselves jumped in on this by buying self-driving car startups for hundreds of millions of dollars, making the self-driving car startup owners wealthy. And then they were left with technology that leaves a lot to be desired. So after getting all excited in the boardroom in the executive suite about we can't be left behind, if our car doesn't drive itself like somebody else's car, no one will buy it. So they, all these startups cashed in on it. That was a good deal. Should have done that. My family and I should have just gotten together and done a self-driving car startup. I don't think that I don't know what kind of due diligence was done, but we might have been able to get like tens of millions of dollars or something, which would be enough to buy the paint needed to make this model work. And then it was like, well, lane keeping assistance, I guess that's an okay thing. Automated braking, that has been around for a good long time, and people have gotten used to that, and that's a good thing to have, like adaptive cruise control. But yeah, fully autonomous driving is it's like nuclear fusion. And so I'm sure that the people who did these startups hung around for a while and, played around with radar and LiDAR and all of that sort of thing, and took their tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars and went off and started something else that they could sell. Not to disparage them too much, but I think that it was way overpromised, right? And so just to make my rant not repeating everything, my Turing test equivalent for self-driving car is go to Buffalo or Chicago in the winter at night in a blizzard where there's 3 or 4 inches of snow on the ground already. It's coming down doing the Star Wars effect, right? If you've ever driven in the snow, you know exactly what I mean. If not, just, watch something going into hyperdrive on Star Wars when all the stars like shoot out from a cone in front of you. It looks exactly like that in your headlight. The stop signs are covered. There's a power outage, and the traffic signals aren't working. And you need to get home from an event that you went to, and you went to the event before the blizzard started, but now it's in full force, and you call a robo-taxi. And if that robo-taxi can get to you and get you home in those conditions, that's my test for self-driving cars. Otherwise, all you've got is a car that will pay attention to very clearly marked lane markings, standardized lane markings on highways or expressways, which, I suppose there's some people will find that kind of a relaxing thing to have. Others will abuse it, and there'll be a problem. But, okay. Well, this is staying in place in a way that looks like it can be shaped pretty well. So I'm going to stop messing with it. What else can I rant on about? Yeah, too many technological things in the vehicle. Just stuff you don't need that is a distraction. Of course, it's not a distraction if the car can really drive itself, because you're not going to be distracted because you're not paying attention anyway. But if it's not a self-driving car, then it is a problem. Oh, and I left my sandpaper cutting scissors over there, and I'll have to go get them. I think I'm going to be using needle files on this as well. This is where I begin to wonder if I'm wasting my time on these astronaut figures and whether I might be better off just ignoring them in terms of the model. I don't know. But they are not really good. It certainly can be saved. It certainly can be sanded and filed down so that they look okay. But they should have been made better. I wonder if I'd be better off using my time on this stream ignoring these astronauts and spending my time working on parts of the lunar module. Having said that, I answered my own question, because if in fact that would be a better use of my time, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to spend Friday fiddling around with astronaut figures. That's what I'm going to do. To be making them unseemly. Oh, that was it. That was my bad joke du jour. But okay. You probably didn't even get it. Unseemly because I'm making the visible seams go away. One has to explain one's really bad jokes. Then they are beyond bad. Shouldn't have explained that. Well, doing this kind of little stuff, working on the seams of the astronaut. to try to make them go away does provide ample opportunity for curmudgeon complaining and curmudgeon complaining about newfangled gizmos. You know, one would think that I would start complaining about smartphones, and I could go on about those. I think that I think the problem with smartphones is that they just take up your time. They're just this huge distraction. You know, just get glued to them, and they become kind of addictive. What's a little worrying about it is watching babies and little kids, just not necessarily smartphones, but screens, so kind of the equivalent of those, just become overwhelmed by it. Stare at them and touch them, manipulate them. I've seen that happen with kids under a year old. It used to be the television, right? So maybe it's no different than that. These files sometimes mar the surface texture. It's not so much, other than the helmet. I'm not terribly concerned about this because the surface texture of the astronaut suit is supposed to be it's actually supposed to be kind of not shiny, right? You saw the picture of the suit that I showed you before. It's fabric, so it's you know, so if it turns out not to be like perfectly smooth, that probably is just fine. I'm thinking that these files work a lot. They're just easier to control than the sandpaper because I can get them into little nooks and crannies and things where the seam shows, like around the collar of the helmet down here, just above the shoulder. It's neat to get in there like that. You want to I am going to use the sandpaper to polish the helmet though, because the moon suit helmet was actually covered in fabric, but I think the helmets that they wore, the intravehicular, that's one of those many. Move this down so you can actually see better. I forgot about that. Yeah, on camera. Here is on camera. It's on camera spot. Intravehicular. That's one of those fancy multi-syllabic words. The inside suits, right? The inside suits had shiny helmets. I'm pretty sure that they weren't covered in fabric, and it was just the plastic or the metal or whatever material it was that they were using. So I'll probably give that a little rub down with some really fine sandpaper. Well, this is going to take forever doing this, and I'm real happy about that. I am glad to be taking forever doing nothing but sanding away at these little seams or filing away at them. And then it may be like on this arm. Don't know if there's going to be a gap there that needs to be filled in or not. Looks like not. It looks like it just kind of goes away as it's filed. But because the suit has these wrinkles in it, and it's made out of fabric, using the file is working out just fine, because if there's like little marks and things, it's not going to be isn't going to be an issue. It'll just be like a fold in the suit. So I won't really know how well this came out until after I prime them. Then I'll be able to see if the seams are sufficiently covered or not. If they aren't, well, then I'll just go at it again. And if they are, then I won't. So the three sitting astronauts, I definitely want to be able to use, because, like I said, the model itself, the couches in which they sit, are just very poorly molded, and it would look dumb without these figures sitting in it. And then the standing on the moon figure, I'm going to. Oh, that's pretty funny. Okay, as I'm looking at this, so there's all this flashing, the seams don't fit, that kind of thing, right? And they molded a heel on the bottom of the boot. Seriously. Wow. That's pretty funny. It's actually pretty funny that they would, that the thing you would expect that they would really pay attention, they didn't, and then they did, where you wouldn't expect it or even need it. So yes, self-driving cars. So yeah, so that was my Turing test equivalent for self-driving cars. Northern City at night in a blizzard. Get me home. You know, and none of this pulling over to the side safety mode nonsense. Okay. That just strands you on the side of the road. That is not getting home. And yeah, the radio and the TV and every place else is saying, you know, hazardous driving conditions, we recommend that you stay home. Well, I'm not home, and there's no other place to go. Yeah. The tavern there probably, you know, is going to close at 2 a.m. anyway, so I can't stay there all night. It's the only thing that's really open at the moment. Sure, I mean, that would be a convenient place to stay, right? But no, can't do that. So, well, here's a comparison. This is a side with the seam still not cleaned up, and this is the side with the seam almost completely cleaned up. And it's coming along okay. It's very slow and tedious, but that's what I want today. I want this Friday to be slow and tedious, because it's a thing that I can't really mess up too much, which should be done. Okay, so it's not a waste of time, but it's also kind of relaxing, because it's not something that can go very bad, you know, like awful, messed up, bad. It's not it doesn't give rise to a high probability of oops. Because I think sometimes what's happening with cars now is, because something can be done technologically, with computers and all of that sort of thing, there seems to be some sort of felt obligation to do it, whether it's a useful thing or not. It was like back in my day when talking cars came out. That was a huge. It's like, oh yeah, we can make the car talk to you. Well, you could also just put a little warning buzzer in that could tell you if a door was ajar or if the gas cap was not secured or something like that. In fact, I don't even think it did that. I don't think there was a gas cap sensor, which actually would have been a useful thing to have then. Is if your gas cap wasn't sealed, because sometimes this was before the yeah. I mean, this is hard to imagine, right? Nowadays, there's these capless gas things. It's just the flap on the outside, right? Which you could sometimes leave open by mistake. I've done that. It can happen. It would be nice if there was like a warning signal that you've left it open. But back in the day, there were two things. There was the exterior flap, the door, and then there was a gas cap separate on the inside that you needed to unscrew. Well, there was a time, if you can imagine this, there was a time when that wasn't even tethered on. Okay. That was a big innovation, is to add a little strap on the gas cap so that when you took it off, it it might flop around, but it didn't drop on the ground or roll around or anything. And so there was actually an aftermarket in gas caps, because you take it off and you set it down and you forget it to put it back on, or you dropped it and couldn't find it. So in service stations, and they were then, they weren't mini marts as much. You could buy replacement gas caps. There were a couple of different sort of standard sizes, because there was a likelihood, not just a possibility, but a likelihood that at some time you would lose the gas cap. So sometimes they were tethered. In other cases, there was like a little shelf on the inside of the door, the door you'd open, the flap. Well, this is pretty good. You can see the top of my head and the lantern. I suppose now that I looked up, if you wanted to, I could move over a little bit and work this way. Anyway, that's a newfangled gizmo that I am happy to have. The capless gas tank thing, where it's just the external flap, and all you have to do is remember to push it back when you're done with it. Because, like I said, but then, the downside of that, of course, is that the whole aftermarket gas cap business collapsed. So if you were, say, you owned a business that made aftermarket gas caps, and it wasn't a huge market, but it was a steady one, because people are always losing their gas caps because they weren't tethered, or there wasn't a little shelf on the inside of the door where you'd set it, which was not as good as having it tethered. Okay, because you could still drop it. Having the little tether was the best. That was the best way of dealing with it, because then it stayed attached until the little plastic strap broke, and then you didn't have that anymore. And they did, because they were just little plastic straps. Anyway, yeah, when you think about it, that was one of those job-killing events, right? That happened because people weren't losing their gas caps anymore. And so the whole aftermarket gas cap business collapsed. Your business would have just lost its purpose. I mean, nobody would buy your gas caps anymore. And then that would have been that. All your machinery, and then the whole supply chain, for all the gas cap parts and materials, that would have collapsed. Now, would have, it did. It's gone. It just ended. Right? But we don't often think about those things. People can rail on about this or that as being job killing. But what was really job killing are things like not having a separate gas cap anymore. And then the service stations lost us, the gas stations that used to stock replacement gas caps because you lost yours, because you would, when it would happen. They lost that whole source of revenue. And what was it replaced with? I don't know. You'd have to replace it with like chips or something. Pretzel sticks, Slim Jims. But you weren't selling gas caps anymore. It increased our convenience, but there were probably, I don't know how many. There's probably like millions of dollars in the economy just poofed out of existence because of the capless gas enclosure thing that we now have so convenient for ourselves. So that all went the way of the TV antenna business or the vacuum tube replacement business. Nary a whimper. So what does that have to do newfangled things? Well, that was a newfangled thing, the capless gas cap thing, that I found to be very convenient. But then when you think about it, for some people at least, it was a devastation. Is everything like that? Is there always a downside to everything that has an upside? Sometimes there's a downside to something that's a downside. Like there is no redeeming value to some things. That happens. But in this case, it was a good innovation, unlike talking cars, which weren't. Still, it was a bad thing for some people. Trying to decide if this is still part of the seam or if it's just like part of the suit, that it might just be like a fold in the suit. At least that's the cover story I could give it. Well, this guy cleaned up, I'd say it's cleaned up actually quite well, kind of surprisingly well. It's just, there's some little seams here and there, like on the boot and whatever, but the irregularities, because of the nature of the suit, I don't think they're going to be that bad. So I'm going to look at them after it's primed and see how it looks. Here, that needs some rounding off, I think. Where it's just the seam is just a little bit too, it pokes out a little too much. Okay, I'm going to take a little bit, get a little piece of this, and I'm going to rub it around its head. I'm polishing the helmet. because that's going to, most of this is going to be painted just kind of it's not quite matte, but it's not a real shiny white. Okay. But the helmet, I think I might make look shiny. I'm going to use more of a gloss white on it if I have some. There's a ring around the visor, edging. I'm going to look that up to see if that's a different color in the real thing or not. I don't know if it is. Anyway, it was kind of interesting reminiscing about gas caps. But I don't think, at least the cars we've had, there's never been a warning light or a sound about the gas cap being left open. I'll take that back. I think there was one. So it was like the engine light would come on. Yeah, that was. For some reason, the manufacturer decided that the check engine light, the little engine shaped thing, the internal combustion engine shaped thing, it's can't be the same thing anymore because of electric cars and stuff. But that would come on, and we learned that once when we took it in, because it was like the check engine light's on, and that means you should have it checked. And they said, "Oh, your gas cap's just loose." So it was, oh, that's how they tell you that you didn't close your gas cap, is the check engine light comes on. Not intuitive. Yeah, it worked. It got us to pay attention to it, but I said it's not the first thing you would think of when the check engine light comes on. But it was a good thing when the check engine light went off after closing the gas cap can door, whatever thing. Okay. This is taking a good long time, which is good because I wanted it to. But I think this might be okay, but I'll test it again after it's primed. If the seams are still showing, it's fairly straightforward to just sand them down a little bit more after it's primed and reprime it. They're newfangled gizmos. I don't know. Oh, yeah. There are some other newfangled gizmos. It's like an internet-enabled refrigerator. So I could see having mechanical devices like that, internet-enabled, if they were kinds of things that required routine maintenance, where it would signal over the internet that it was time for, scheduled maintenance had to happen then. Or if there were a fault indicator for something that you weren't monitoring regularly, that would send it out to a service company, and then they would call you and say, your air conditioning unit is showing fault number, whatever, XXX. It's going to fail in the next 20 minutes. Do you want somebody to come out and fix it for you? There, if you don't mind somebody paying attention to your appliance, if it's kind of appliance that needs that kind of attention or could benefit from that kind of attention, I could kind of see that. For a refrigerator, a lot of refrigerators, at least the older ones, would run for decades without really any maintenance, especially when the closed systems became really more effective and you didn't have to have it recharged occasionally with the old ones had, I think I used ammonia, okay, which would sometimes evaporate on you. But even those would last for decades and run for that long. But the internet-enabled refrigerators are designed to do, okay, here's a scenario. Here's a scenario for you. It's supposed to tell you whether you're out of milk. I'll just make this is a made-up thing. So you're out of milk, and it will order more milk for you. Okay. So there's supposedly a milk bottle measurer sensor in your refrigerator. Why you would do that, I don't know, but because you can, right? So you can. So you get your milk bottle detector measurer thing, and it detects that your milk is low, and so it orders milk for you. What could go wrong? Well, first of all, that would mean that you'd have to pay attention to where you put your milk. Because if you set your milk in a different place and your refrigerator weren't smart enough, maybe that's what artificial intelligence does, right? Is it has sensors mounted all over the inside of your refrigerator. So if you don't put it on exactly the same shelf that you did where the sensor was, originally set up, you'd have a little mark on your refrigerator that said, you must put milk here or your sensor will malfunction. Great. One more thing to pay attention to. That's a convenience, right? So let's even assume that you've got a really ultra smart refrigerator with sensors all over the place so that regardless of where you put your milk carton, it will measure your milk. Well, what if you don't have like one of these plastic cartons that's sort of translucent and you can't see inside of it? What if you've got a cardboard carton that's opaque? Will it still work? Is it based on weight? Do they have little scales scattered all over the inside of your refrigerator? I don't know. I doubt that. But let's put that aside. Let's put that aside and let's say that it is able to, and let's just say that you do that. You want your refrigerator to know whether you've got milk or not. So you always put your milk in the same place all the time so that it doesn't confuse the refrigerator. Because if there's no milk carton there, it'll think that you definitely need milk. Okay. And it'll order you some milk. But what if you're, okay, I'm going on vacation and I don't want more milk because if the milk is ordered, there'll be no one here to pick it up. I'm assuming that it orders it and some grocery delivery service gets the order for milk delivery. So the milk will sit outside and rot. Okay. So you really don't want milk delivered. But what does that mean then? Does that mean that you need to tell your internet-enabled refrigerator that you're going away and that they shouldn't order anything while you're away? That's not convenient. It was a whole lot more convenient to just not buy more milk because you're going away for a while. Can your internet-enabled refrigerator be hacked? maybe it can be. Maybe what you've just done is you've told the thieves in your neighborhood that you're going to be gone for a while, and they could just watch your porch or your stoop or your delivery place or whatever, and notice that you've got milk piling up because since you don't pick up the milk and put it in the refrigerator, your refrigerator is not going to detect the presence of milk. It will detect the presence of not milk. So I suppose somebody could notice that you've got like 6 gallons of milk piled up, one of which rotted so much it exploded. They would notice that. That could happen. Or they could simply hack your internet-enabled refrigerator, and the refrigerator would tell them that you're not around. No milk coming because we're on vacation. I mean, so other than telling a maintenance and repair place that the compressor on your refrigerator has failed and everything is going to go bad, I'm not sure what an internet-enabled refrigerator would do for you other than, wow, really dumb things that would probably require you to pay more attention to the location of things in your refrigerator than you would care to. So anyway, yeah, that's a thing that just like, why? Why would you want that? So that's a newfangled gizmo that I think is kind of pointless. Internet-enabled appliances, just in general. It's like, well, maybe you could start your microwave on your way home from work, or get your oven to start heating ahead of time so it was preheated by the time you came in. But it's like, we've been decades and decades and decades without that. Is it really that much of a convenience for very many people at all? So that's my old man curmudgeon take on internet-enabled appliances. And I'm sure, this is just me being curmudgeon-y. So if you disagree with me, that's fine, because even if you're an old man curmudgeon, you might disagree about these newfangled gizmos. That's just fine. This isn't meant to be controversial. This is meant to be just somebody, filling the time while they're filing down the seams on the outsides of little astronaut figures. It's a form of entertainment. This is entertainment. It's not commentary on anything in particular, other than one person's, and it might not even be my opinion. You don't even know that. It might just be making things up for the sake of entertainment. For all you know, I've got an internet-enabled refrigerator that orders milk for me whenever I don't want it. You don't know that, and you won't. I'm not going to tell. About. There's got to be a whole bunch of more stuff, because I've got 20 minutes to go before I can even take a break. I have to give this some thought. Thanks for joining in, and thanks for chatting. I do believe we stream 3 Sundays a month, and I do believe that this Sunday there's going to be a stream. Yes, so that will be happening. But I'm not going to be streaming the painting. on Monday because I will be gone. So relaxing painting will not, well, I have to say there's not been much painting on this model. That's been really different than the submarine. Okay, I don't know if you have a chance to look at some of the old YouTubes when I was working on the submarine. Some of those might be more interesting because there was a huge number of really tiny pieces that required a lot of detail painting, some of which I actually kept on screen, some of which I wandered off, because there is that. But yes. Okay. Well, thanks for joining in. This will give me an opportunity to explain what I'm doing. Dice and Dungeons is, like you said, the Sunday stream. No. See, that's the thing. If you go on Sunday, then we're playing Dungeons and Dragons, and you get to watch a very entertaining, well-made, well-performed, a lot of fun Dungeons and Dragons show. But there's no commentary on internet-enabled refrigerators. You have to come here for that, and that's not a regular feature, although I suppose it could be. I mean, I could make it a regular feature, is internet-enabled appliances. You can internetly enable your cook surface, which I suppose means that you can put a pot on your cook surface and let it sit there all day while you're at work rotting away or whatever, and then turn it on as you leave your place of employment, and when you get home you'll have just only slightly spoiled but very hot food. Or you don't have to walk across your apartment to your stove to turn it on. You can be at your computer monitor playing a game or reading the news or something, and turn it on from there. I'm not sure that that's worth hundreds of dollars extra they charge for that sort of thing. I'm not sure that would get into the episode. Oh, but I'll make a plug here. But that idea could be a feature in our improv session, our warm-up improv session that we do before each episode. We do those so that we get warmed up, so that we're, our voices are working and that sort of thing. But we could have magical refrigerators that have the equivalent of internet connection. And we could be attacked through our refrigerator, our hacked refrigerator. That might be something we could do. Anyway, this stream, and thank you for joining. Please become a follower, and then tell everybody you know and anybody you meet, even for the first time, that they should become a follower. That would be really appreciated. I have to do a shameless plug for us. I have to do that. We don't have. It could be, yeah. That makes sense. That the internet connection would be the equivalent of the curse, or the curse would be the equivalent of an internet connection. It probably is really accurate. It would be an accurate portrayal. Anyway, this stream started because we print our own dungeon tiles on the 3D printers behind us. And I can show you some samples, which I should do as soon as I'm done with this guy. And this stream started because we prime, paint, and finish the dungeon tiles that we use on our show down here on this workbench. And our DM said, well, why don't you stream it? And I said, why? And she said, why not? And I said, why? And she said, why not? And why not worked. So we set up a little Ring camera and started streaming it. And then when I didn't have any dungeon tiles or minifigs to paint, I started doing models. And I did a really cool 1960s vintage Renwall cutaway nuclear submarine where this side of the hull folds down. Yeah, I finished that a while ago. And one of these days I'll pull it out and show it, but people can catch it on the old YouTube ones. And so we started this tradition called Submarine Wednesday because I spent Wednesday working on the submarine and the other 2 days working on minifigs and dungeon tiles. And now there aren't any minifigs and dungeon tiles, so I'm just doing a model. And now I'm working on an Apollo model. It's the entire Apollo stack of the fairing, the lunar module, the service module, command, and the escape tower. And I finished the escape tower and the service module. I've got the parts for the lunar module scattered around, but I'm taking some time to work on these old astronaut figurines that sit in the couches inside the command module. And the reason I'm spending a huge amount of time filing and sanding them is because they come in two halves and the halves don't match up and there's horrible seams and it's just they're just ugly. You know, here's one here where you can see all the seams and stuff on it. So I'm trying to finish them so that when they're painted, they look okay. But what I'm going to do after this one is done, at least as well as I can see it needs to be done at the moment. Like I said, after I prime them, I'm going to check them again and clean up any really bad spots and then reprime them. Let me show you the dungeon tiles, because these are so amazing. I am told, I'm going to just say this, I am told that the campaign is, it's in person, but it's not live. We record our sessions ahead of time. But it's like the old saying, right? Recorded in front of a live studio audience, it's kind of like that. But when it streams, there's a moderator and we have a live chat during the stream. Okay, so when it streams on Sundays, there is a live chat. But then each episode is also posted on YouTube so people can watch it later. And you can even listen to it as a podcast, which is kind of cool. So here's some examples. I'm going to show you samples of our dungeon tiles. I am told that there is a possibility that someday Dice and Dungeons might even be able to sell these as super premium dungeon tiles. So we print them on our printer back here. There's 3 of them, so we can do them in quantity as we have. And this one's been sort of painted. The floor and the wall are printed in one piece. So our DM, who's also the printing whiz, was able to set this up so that the vertical printing, not just the horizontal part, but the vertical printing worked out. And so there's that solid thing. And then what we did when the stream started was, after they were primed, that's done in a spray booth, they're hand-painted base coat, and then some detail painted in, and then this one isn't, but they would be washed so that they looked worn. But the outstanding feature here is that under this plate, in each corner are little ball magnets. They're like little BBs, but they're magnets, and they rotate inside these wells, and so they magnetically attach to each other. And they don't require any special kind of base. You can see this is just a piece of cardboard. And so you can rearrange your dungeon just like super fast. In fact, our DM one time made a mimic dungeon. Okay. What I mean is that we went through the dungeon, and when we got to a certain part of it, we broke a power supply that was part of it. and the dungeon rearranged itself. Okay, so that's kind of cool. But it gets yet even better. We have these simulate wood. So these are printed with wood grain and so on, and these are primed and then base coated in kind of a tan color, and then washed in a special color wash that we have that brings out the wood grain, and instead of just making it look like dead tan color, it makes it look really lively. And then we paint in the stucco. And there's different, we can have different variations. Sometimes the stucco might be red, right? Or the wood might be a lighter wood instead of a darker wood. But these have the same feature. And we have doors. So when you go, the wash really makes it look, especially on the wood. I really love the way these turn out. So if you go into a warehouse. Yeah, it is. You go into a warehouse and you say, I wonder what's on the other side of this door. Let's find out. Oh, the door is locked. Pick the lock and you say, let's open it. And then you open the door, right? And since you're clever players, you stand here, right? So that when you open the door, you're hidden behind the door. And when your foes come out, you can jump them and surprise them. We finish them front and back. So like, say, for example, you were in a warehouse, right? We have street tiles. Those were just finished. And if you check, we're going to be using them in a couple of weeks, where we are going to be out on a street. We have street tiles, cobblestone streets. Okay. And you could actually have an event inside of a building. There's floor tiles here, and you could open the door and go out onto the street, and the building would be finished. Some of these have windows, okay, metal lattice windows. Just even with it, like 3 or 4 simple kinds of shapes, you can really do really cool things. One set we have, this is like a wizard lair or something. You'll have to imagine more of it than this, but this is a sample of a wall. This is finished stone instead of rough stone. It's cut stone floor and wall, the same sort of idea, but the sigil is molded on, and then we hand paint that. That's all hand painted in. Yeah, I did this one, so I'm going to be proud of it. It's really cool, but this is a fire mage. Okay. And part of what there is inside the floor, there is a cauldron. And I don't know if we have any here. Let me look. No, they might have been put away. There's a little magnet in the base of this cauldron, and there's a flame, a plastic flame that also has a magnet in it, and you could be here in the fire mage's lair, because you can tell it's fire mage because of the sigil, right? We can't make the sigil modular, but we can print different ones. We actually have sigils for the 4 basic elements. There's a water sigil and an earth sigil and an air sigil and a fire sigil. I just happen to have the fire one here. But what you can do is if these were to sell the wall, you would buy one of these with a different sigil on it, and you would just switch out. Okay, I'll put it in the middle here. Okay, so if you had it like this, you just say, I want an earth magic place. You would take that out and put the earth sigil in. Just like that. And so you wouldn't have to buy like a whole new dungeon to have an earth dungeon as opposed to a fire dungeon. You just have to buy walls with different sigils, and you'd switch them out. Yeah, I think, this is way more fun and exciting, I think, than the Apollo model. But anyway, I'm working on the Apollo model while we are deciding whether or not to print more of these dungeon tiles and do something with them. I really like the cauldron, okay, because there's you can use the cauldron in different, whether you've got a fire thing or not, where there's a flame that goes in or not. But especially since you want the flame to go on, and you're putting on a show, or even you're running your own D&D campaign, and so instead of imagining that the fire is on, you take the flame and just insert it, and the magnet holds it in place. Yeah, I mean, you can do a lot of things with it, or you could have a water fountain come out of it. But this is another one of those, like I'm thinking it could just be a piece in and of itself. And if you had, a bunch of these cut stone tiles, or even the rough stone, it even kind of works with that, and you wanted to have an event like this, to use it for something, you could. You could even fill it with liquid. I mean, you could fill it with blood or slime or necromancy ichor or whatever. But the part I like best, of course, is that, and that's what makes them super premium, I guess I'll say, is that you can just rearrange them so easily, and they hold together. You don't need a special container or anything. You just put your dungeon together, and there it is. And they're interchangeable. If you had like a wooden wall, but you had a stone section, they all work together. They're the same scale. And yeah, the little ball magnets are actually a little bit hard to get because they're a choking hazard. You have to prove that you're not a kid who's going to give them to their little brother or sister, and but they come in big volumes. Anyway, this stream relaxing, the Monday, Wednesday, Friday thing started because preparing these, just putting them together for use in our show. Yeah, I think we're really proud of these, and I think I think people who do D&D would really enjoy being able to use these kinds of things in their event. And there's all sorts of other little stuff that goes with this. There's columns, there's arched windows, there's what are they called? The little gaps in the wall where you shoot arrows. I'm old. I don't remember words. Anyway, yeah, maybe I'll just leave these here because they're not too terribly much in the way right now. And that was a good way to fill the time before the break. Now, I am told that when I take a break, a lot of people don't come back afterwards because I'm gone for about a half an hour. I'm trying to cut down on the duration of the breaks. But well, it's not so much the schedule as it is certain parts of my body telling me that I need to take a break. What can I say? Old guy needs to take a break. Wow, this shoulder isn't that good. So after break, and I'm going to try to take a short one today. I keep promising that, and I keep failing to fulfill my promise. I'm going to do this other astronaut guy, and then do the standing on the moon guy, and then we'll see how much time there's left and do some things. But these are cleaning up way better than I thought they would when I first put them together. I'm not saying that they're beautiful, but I'm saying that they are not awful. Yeah. Especially since I'm paid nothing to do this. That this is anyway. Um, thank you for the follow. I hope you stick around, and maybe if you take a little bit of a break, come back in about half an hour or so, and I'll be back doing more of this sort of thing, working on the astronauts. And then I'm not here on Monday, but I will be next Wednesday, where I will continue to do stuff on the Apollo. But after break, if you come back, I will show off the parts of the model that I've already completed. I haven't done that in a while. Anyway, thanks for watching. I do need to take at least a short break. I will see you then. Break is over. Two out of three things worked. One is I remembered to put on a vest because for some reason it always feels chilly down here after break. And I wasn't late. That was two. But the third is that I had a mug full of water that I was going to bring down so that I wasn't dehydrated. And I forgot that. So, yep, I'll be dehydrated by the time we're done. But I mean, not really badly or anything like that. It's just that I'll be thirsty. So what I'm working on here are the astronaut figures for the Apollo model. I should get up. I should just go get my water, but I'm not going to. What I am going to do is I'm going to bring over the parts of the model that I have finished. Okay, I've finished the escape tower and the service module, and I'm going to show those off, basically to prove that I'm actually working on the model and getting things done. So I'm going to be right back. In this box, protected from dust, is a service module. This is the escape tower. This part here, and I think it came out really pretty well. Okay, including these little doors up here that open up to show the interior of the secondary rocket motors. Oh, it does have an address. Thank you for noticing that. Yeah, I appreciate that. I don't want the personal stuff to be out there. So now it's going to be shown on YouTube. So maybe we should edit that out before it goes up. I'll mention that. So the way this escape tower works is that it's attached to the top of the command module. Here it's attached to some sticky tack that I use to hold it in place. And it's got these 4 rocket nozzles. There's a solid fuel rocket in here. And if it needs to escape, those will shoot off. Yeah, it is kind of large, isn't it? It is. The whole thing's going to stand like this tall. I don't know where I'm going to put it when it's done. I really have no clue. So anyway, the way this works is that the solid rocket boosters shoot off. And then if it isn't used, and it never has been used, is that there's actually up here a smaller rocket motor that exhausts up here and on the other side. Okay, this just exposes it. Is that it shoots off and pulls this entire tower away from the Apollo stack. So yeah, it is fairly large. And then the service module, which is in this box, and I'm going to tape over the address here. There we are. So that's not there anymore. Thank you for noticing that. Anyway, it's in this box so that it doesn't get dirty. The service module here this is kind of cool. There's actually two components to this that are not attached to each other. This is the service module, okay, and you can see the reaction control jets around the outside of it, okay. This is the nozzle for the rocket engine, which is used with some frequency during the mission. And this attaches to the bottom. Okay, I'm not going to put it on because then I'll have to pull it off again. That it looks like this when it's put together. Okay. And it detaches so you can see the detail of some of the piping underneath, right? And it there's a lot of detail, but what's cool about this is that this panel here, I'm going to try to do this carefully. This panel is the one that opens and shows you some of the detail on the inside of the service module. Isn't that neat? So the thing on the top are supposed to be fuel cells, and that's an oxygen tank and a hydrogen tank that mixes together to feed the fuel cells that powers this whole thing. There's these here are also oxygen, hydrogen, and helium tanks that basically run the gizmos on the wall. And then this thing here has to do with the fuel tank for the rocket motor that attaches to this. And then it goes back together. And the parts that aren't done yet is the command module. How do I know? Because I grew up with it. I have to say that. I grew up, I was in high school while the whole Apollo program was going on. I had just graduated the year just before the lunar landing. So yeah, I was really into the aerospace stuff back then too. So I followed the entire Apollo program the entire time. Anyway, I think it came out okay. I managed to get the detail painted in on all like the pipes and things that are on the top there and on the bottom. These are the reaction control jets. These are a real pain to work with, I have to say. That there's 16 of them on the lunar module, which is the thing I'm going to be working on next. Anyway, I did my best so that the seams on the brackets didn't show. They show a little bit. You know, I couldn't get them done completely. But anyway, this is done. And the escape tower is done. And I've got the pieces for the... Yeah, I blanked out the address. Thanks for noticing that. I blanked out the the service module's done, and I got the pieces for the. Isn't that great? It's almost professional redaction. So I'm putting it in here, trying to keep them. I don't know. I can't keep this dust free, and like you said, it's bigger than you would expect. And I don't know what I'm going to do with it when it's done. Each of the components, I can put each of the components in a box or a storage thing, but when it's put together, I think it's going to stand like, the whole thing will probably stand close to 2 feet tall. So it's not going to be easy to display. The other thing, well, it's like the submarine model. The submarine model is 2.5 feet long. I mean, where do you put that, right? And someday I'll bring it out and show it off. But yeah, where do you end up putting these things? Where do you don't have, they have to be kept dust free, so they need to be in a display case or in a box or something. So they're kind of fun to build and fun to look at, but not very practical to have around the house when it comes right down to it. Well, I'm going to keep working on these little these astronaut guys. I take my glasses off because they've got trifocals, and when I can see up close. I'm nearsighted, so I can see up to about a foot away. But with trifocals, those of you who are not privileged to have them, the part that shows things close up is like that. This tiny little area down at the bottom, which is really fine if you hold your glasses up like this or look down for reading, but they're not very good at all for close-up work. Fortunately, I'm glad that I'm nearsighted so I can see things close up and work on these without glasses. People who are my age are usually farsighted, and they can't see anything close up, which is why they read newspapers like that, because they can't start seeing things until it's at least a foot away. Mine's just the opposite. I can see things until they are 2 feet away. But yeah, I grew up with the whole Apollo program. It was just amazing. It was an amazing time from the 50s, growing up in grade school in the 50s and the space race thing. Falling behind in the space race, getting all worried about that. Everybody was worried about, falling behind the Soviets. It was a pretty exciting time. Rockets blew up with some frequency then. That was exciting too. The news liked to show tapes of the recordings. I guess they were on tape. No, actually not. They were done on film. That was back in the day when recordings were done on film and not on magnetic tape, not routinely anyway, even for the major television studios. Oh, this one's really messy. When I put these in the command module, I'm going to have to be careful to put the ones that look best in the most visible places and the ones that look not very good in the less visible places. This one does not look good. This one's really kind of messy. I'm going to have to, we'll see how well I can rehab this astronaut. Might be the middle one, kind of out of the way of everything else. It's a big gap on the shoulder. I don't know if that will close or not. I might have to fill that in. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Getting these done. This was just kind of an interlude working on these astronaut figures. The next component that I'll be working on next week, starting Wednesday, because I won't be here Monday, is the fairing. These really big pieces here into which the lunar module sits. So I've got these all painted and they're ready for assembly. This is pretty big. It stands about, that's about 8 inches high. And then this, hopefully, I hope it comes together because everything else sits on top of this when these leaves are closed. Yeah, he definitely, this guy is definitely, has many seams. He is not seamless. One of these streams, I'm just going to take the time to read the Apollo story. I talked about this at the very beginning of the stream. The model came with the Apollo story, and part of this was written after the landing. At least the introduction was, but it's pretty obvious that part of this, like I said, the type font changes and the spacing changes, was clearly written before the launch, and it's just the way it's written. It's written in sort of dramatic language, overly dramatic in a few places. Sometimes it has technical detail in it that you probably wouldn't, be interested in, but it's there. And and it has these weird illustrations that are artist conceptions instead of the real thing. So I think it's going to be, anyway, I think it might be fun to just read it. Just because it's part of the Apollo. So when there's an interlude, an appropriate interlude in the construction of the model, or I just don't feel like working on it sometime, which could happen too, I'll read that instead. That should be relaxing. It'll just be reading. It'll be words. But it's kind of fun to, to just maybe, for those who weren't alive then, a way to kind of experience the time, to have something that was written at that time and describing what was going on kind of in the language of the time as well. Because it is not the way we would write things now. It's not how we would talk about it currently. It's a very different experience. But yeah, growing up during the space race, that was pretty amazing. We had the X-15 space plane. It was we talk about the thing. Some of the private expeditions to space where basically it just goes up and comes back down. I think Branson Virgin has one that's kind of like a plane. It's a wing, but it's bigger than the X-15 was, but it doesn't do anything that wasn't already done in 1964, by the Air Force with the X-15. So we have not made dramatic progress. We have not made very dramatic progress at all in aerospace since the 1960s. The last moon landing was in 1973 or something like that, 73 or 74. So here we are 50 years after we stopped going to the moon, and now we're just talking about going back again, and it's turning out to be a bigger challenge than it was in the 1960s in terms of getting stuff to work. Part of my old curmudgeon rant about newfangled gizmos is that I think one of the reasons we could pull off from start to finish, it took like 6 years from the start of the Apollo program until we actually landed on the moon. It was only 10 years between the first U.S. astronaut in 1959 and landing on the moon 10 years later. It was only 10 years between beginning and conclusion. I think part of it is that we overthink things now. We overtech them. The computing power, you've probably heard this before, that the whole Apollo thing. Yeah, I'm sure it was. Back then, this was a big public relations Cold War kind of thing to the whole space race. And so, yeah, I think the drama of it was all part of that. The spectacle of it. And, and part of it is just plain public relations and advertising, is to make things seem exciting so you want it to be part of it and watch it. But yeah, it was definitely that. Well, yeah, back in the 50s and 60s, there was money for both of those because of the Cold War situation. We were dropping, as compared to our gross domestic product, I guess that's a way you could compare it, is we were putting huge amounts of money into nuclear weapons, anti-ballistic missile systems, all sorts of military things, some of which turned out not to even work compared to now. So yeah, we were going, just really amazing things happened. Like the other model I built was the prototype George Washington, the very first ballistic missile launching submarine. So why that? Well, because we were afraid that if the Soviet Union attacked us first, that they could destroy our missile silos. Okay. And we wouldn't have anything with which we could attack back. So the submarines were launched. But even that was kind of amazing. I mean, when you think about it, not only did you have a nuclear-powered submarine, which was a pretty incredible thing at the time because nuclear reactors were not very sophisticated, maybe not even safe, we don't know, but there was, as far as we know, there was never a reactor accident on any of the submarines or aircraft carriers. But you have a missile in a silo in a submarine underwater, and it has to be launched up above the surface, ignite, and then take off to its target. And that was all done when scientists, engineers were still using slide rules to calculate things because the computers weren't available enough to do a lot of those calculations. But I think what happens now is because technology is so available, I think we tend to over-technologize things. We kind of under-engineer them and over-compute them because we can. And I think that slows things down and doesn't necessarily make them more reliable, because then everything's safety depends upon the program. And those can have flaws. They can have bugs. Anyway, that's my rant about it. I think, just part of it too was because of the Cold War situation. There was a sense of urgency about everything. We needed to do things faster and better and first than the adversary. And so there was just this attitude of we need to get it done. And sometimes, the engineers and project managers just really focused on getting things done and getting them to work. And maybe a little bit less on maintaining the bureaucratic pecking order than they did a little bit later on. It was just a different time in terms of incentives and in terms of allocation of resources and people. But growing up then and not being part of all the politics of it, but just the results of it, it was also an exciting time. It was an exciting time to see the first jet-powered. Yes, the theme. Okay, you want me to get back to the refrigerators? Yeah, the theme this whole week has been Old Man Curmudgeon complains about newfangled gizmos. That was the theme. Next week, I don't know. When I get back on the stream on Wednesday, I'm not sure what it'll be. Probably not that. I'll probably lapse into some sort of discussion of the Yogi Bear show. That's always kind of fun too. An analysis comparing the Flintstones and the Jetsons. Which was better? If you don't know what I'm talking about, look up your ancient cartoon history and primetime television cartoons. That was a major innovation as I was growing up sometime in the 60s. Cartoons are not just for kids. Primetime cartoon shows, starting with the Flintstones. And then we even had a primetime puppet show called Dinosaurs, in which the characters were portrayed by basically puppets. It was before Muppets. Or maybe not. I'm not sure. I don't remember if they were before Muppets or not. But there was an entire television show about, they were puppet dinosaurs. I think we will. Yeah. You saw the dinosaur show? You did that? Oh, wasn't it amazing? I really, really love dinosaurs. They were able to portray people without having to portray people, and so they could do things and talk about things that maybe couldn't have been done on in a more traditional format. Of course, the episode that is most relevant to me now is the one about Hurling Day. I should save that till next week because I'm still in Old Man Curmudgeon complains about newfangled gizmos mode. I have to finish that up. I have to stick with my theme now through the end of the stream at least. Then on, I won't be here Monday, but I'll be back on Wednesday. And if I remember what I was talking about, thanks. Really, thanks for joining in. And I really appreciate it. And come back next week and tell all of your friends and enemies and acquaintances and strangers to become followers of Dyson Dungeons. Okay, I appreciate it. And if you haven't already, catch our Dungeons and Dragons stream. Thanks for joining in, and I enjoyed the chat. Thank you. So yeah, I can be a curmudgeon about things. It was fun complaining about internet-enabled refrigerators and why. Just why in the world would anyone even think that would be an idea at all? Like just because theoretically it's possible for a refrigerator to tell you if you've run out of something doesn't mean that it would actually work. Probably wouldn't, or that it would be practical. So that's, as I talked about it earlier during the stream, my image was that the refrigerator decides when you're on vacation that you're out of milk and just keeps ordering it because it, theoretically that's what it's supposed to be able to do, is tell it that you're out of something and have it show up on your doorstep, but you're not around. So the milk, you'd have like 5 gallons of milk rotting on your doorstep. The delivery people were just doing what the internet connected refrigerator was telling it to do. Let's see. These seem to be okay. There's a little gap there. I'm going to try to fill that in, I think. But these three are pretty much ready to be primed. And after I prime them, then I will know if I've succeeded or not, because sometimes after things are painted, it's a lot more evident whether a seam has been adequately filled in or smoothed over or not. Right now, I'm kind of depending on my sense of touch more than anything else. Tell me whether that's the case. I'm only polishing the helmet because most of the spacesuit is just kind of a matte white color, but the helmet I'm going to try to make shiny. I'm going to put a little, like a pearlescent wash on it maybe, or use some of the pearlescent white paint that I use for the exterior of the model. There's a tiny little gap in the shoulder there, and I'm going to fill that in with this, which is just spackling compound, and I'm using this because it sands best of any of the things that I've got, any of my filler options. This one seems to work the best in terms of, and it's okay for the spacesuit, even though it doesn't finish that well. What I mean by that is that it doesn't polish to the same texture as the plastic. It looks a little, and it ends up looking a little porous. But it sands. The Autobody putty that I have sands the best of what I've got. I'm just wiping off what isn't needed. The Autobody putty sands the best, but it melts the plastic, leaving a marred surface. There, you can, this stuff is pink and then it turns white. And that's all it was just that little bit there. This seam, I can't feel it. But I can see it. So I'm not sure what's up with that. I don't know. I guess it might just be the different color because of, that's cemented. And so this looks a little darker, but it's not showing up as a change in the surface texture. Okay, well, these guys are done. I'm going to do the backpack astronaut. This is the one who walks on the moon. I want this one to look pretty decent because I'll probably use it. I may end up not using the one that's inside the Lunar Excursion module. Not that the model itself has a problem, but that it needs to go in to the Lunar Excursion module before the Lunar Excursion module's two halves are cemented together. But then the two halves of the LEM undergo a good deal of movement, okay? Because they need to, like this part, the seams need to be sanded down and maybe filled, okay? It needs to be primed, and then it needs to be painted, and there might need to be touch-up done, which means that it'll just be, if nothing else, it'll be rotated over and over again. And unless the feet are incredibly firmly attached to the base of the Lunar Excursion module, the astronaut's probably going to fall out. It'll fall off. And then I'll have a LEM with a fallen down astronaut rattling around on the inside without any way of fixing it. The only alternative would be through the top hatch, the docking hatch that docks onto the, let me move this down. You can just barely see what I'm doing, but you can at least see I'm doing something while I'm talking. The only alternative would be to somehow insert the astronaut model in through the docking hatch, if it'll even fit. I don't know. It might or might not. Even if it does fit, I'd have to have like a special long tweezers and get it into its position and attach it later. That I have done more impossible things. Well, no, I have done really difficult things with a model before. There was a P-51, the Visible Mustang, which is a real classic model. which is a clear plastic model of a P-51 Mustang showing some of the interior detail, like some of the wing struts and the machine guns and fuel tanks and radios and things. And it has operating landing gear. Okay. And the attachment of the rear landing gear did not attach. It just didn't. And it was about 8 inches from the front of the model to the back. The fuselage was already sealed. And so I did this. I got a little syringe. They make modeling syringes. It's not like for drugs or anything. Can't be used for that. But I got that, which allowed me to fill it with epoxy. And I got this really thin plastic tube. I really did this. I was just amazed that I was able to pull this off. And I ran this thin plastic tube through the inside of the model. And it needed to be flexible because it wasn't just a straight line. It like wound around different things. So I took this clear plastic tube and got the end of it inserted into the socket where the strut that opened and closed the landing gear, that pulled it back and forth, it went into a socket in the landing gear assembly. Anyway, I was able to thread this thin plastic tube into the socket, inject epoxy into that, get the tube out of the way, insert the strut into the now epoxy-filled pocket, and it worked. It was an amazing job of surgery on a plastic model. That was probably the one thing I've done in terms of modeling that was not just real amateurish like some of this is. So I will reiterate, as I do at least once, sometimes more than once on every stream, that I am not a master modeler. I'm just an old guy who likes building models, who happens to have time on this stream because we don't have any dungeon tiles to prepare, to put together vintage models. In one case, the submarine as vintage as I am. That model kit, actually kits, I had multiple kits to get enough parts for one model, was actually from the mid-1960s. As I built the original, I built my original of that back in grade school when the model first came out. And I was able to find, I think it was on eBay probably, I was able to find models that were already started. It's hard to find pristine ones for a reasonable price. Pristine models from that era that are still like shrink wrapped or something just cost way too much. And I didn't want to mess up one that was a collector model, a collector level model, because I was going to build it, right? So I was able to find some that had been started already. And they didn't promise that they were complete, so I bought 3 of them. And that turned out to be a good idea because I used parts from all 3 models to build the submarine. But where am I going with this? I'm not a master modeler. I'm just just filling in time here until we start doing dungeon tiles again, I think. Okay, the foot here, this foot did not close. There's a big gap there. And I'm going to fill that in with the spackling compound like I did the other one. I built models when I was a kid. I didn't worry about the seams. I didn't even think about them, much less think about filling them in or sanding them down or anything like that. I didn't paint any of the models. It was like there's a model of I got a model of a B-36, very like 1/44th scale, 144 or something, because it's a big plane, and you just put it together. Get out your tube cement, get it all over your fingers, big spidery web kinds of things. That was part of kids modeling in the 1950s and early in 1960s, late 50s, mid 60s. That was all part of how kids modeled. You would definitely have spider webs of the tube cement all over your fingers, and that would get on the surface of the model, and there would be fingerprints on it because you touched the model, right? And wherever you touched the model, it dissolved the plastic, and it dissolved the plastic in the shape of your fingerprints. That's how I did things then. So the submarine model, when I built it originally, when it first came out in the mid 60s, I did minimal painting on it. Very minimal painting. I think I painted the missile launch tubes yellow, like the instructions said, and I think I painted the tabletops white because they had like tablecloths on them or something. I don't remember doing much about the instrument panels or anything like that. So, this time the submarine took way longer to build. What was I trying to say is that back in the day, building a model like this, okay, not worrying about the seams or filling in gaps or making the boot so it looked good. Oh, trying to come off the foot would have been done in like 2 afternoons. Two days after school, you come in after school and it'd be raining out, so you couldn't go over to the field and play in the field, which is what we did because there was a field near our house where we would just go and do things like play tag football or baseball or just play catch or whatever. Tag. Sometimes you get people together and you play some sort of game of tag in the field. Anyway, if it was raining too much and the weather was bad, you could go down in the basement and just slap one of these together and the whole thing would be done in like 2 rainy days. It'd be completed. But that's not happening here. No, it's just taking a long time. So this moon suit, I have to say, it was not accurately molded. The connectors for the various pipes are in the wrong place. They're not redundant. I don't know what that's supposed to be. I think that's a camera. Yeah, that's a camera that's attached to the front of the suit. So most of the suit is just painted white. And what will happen with this is that it'll be primed. I'll check the seams again, do some more touching up, probably reprime it again, and then paint it white. I have a kind of a flat white that is close in color to the primer. The primer probably would be sufficient, but I'm going to paint over the primer because the primer has a habit of kind of like dusting. I don't know, there's a word for it, and I can't remember the word, where it gets a little dusty, where it comes off. So I'm going to paint it white, and then there's detail. And I got some pictures of the real astronaut suit. The visor is gold, and I'll be able to paint that. And then they talked about doing things in light blue that aren't. But the camera strap I'll probably do in light blue, and then I'll paint the camera probably dark gray, really dark gray, with a little lens on it. And then these little bits here are red and blue on the real astronaut suit. Those are where hoses connect. And then there's patches on the real astronaut. There's a NASA patch and a mission patch and on the shoulder is a flag patch. I don't know. I mean, unless I decide that I'm going to try to paint a U.S. flag on the shoulder freehand, that would be a fool's errand for me. I bet there are modelers out there that would actually do that, though. You know, they would actually paint a flag. They'd hand paint a flag on the shoulder. I could probably paint a red, white, and blue blob. Might even be able to look like it had stripes, but it wouldn't have the right number of stripes. The detail would just be way beyond my skill level. This particular figure is just kind of a mess. I think the other one's even worse, but we'll see. So I need to fill in the foot here and the back of the foot here, because if this is just a standing astronaut, the boots are going to show. And it's not historically correct in terms of its modeling, but there it is. A master modeler, somebody who really knew what they were doing and were very good at it, wouldn't be messing around with this. They would probably custom print in a historically correct. They would probably custom print a historically correct astronaut model to go with their Apollo stack model. And that I probably could get that done. Actually, I probably could get our DM to 3D print a historically accurate astronaut. But I'm not going to. That would be asking way too much for what this is, which is just an old guy building models on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Okay. It actually is not looking too bad. It's looking okay, except for the boots. So I'm going to get the spackling compound out again, the one I used to make a little filler before. And oh no, it's not done. I didn't do the insides of the legs. Maybe I did one, but boy, this side I have not done. So I just noticed that when I set it down, that the seams are showing very badly. Been, glad I caught that before I primed it. I could have fixed it after I primed it, but it's much better to get this done before the priming, because then maybe there doesn't need to be any corrective work done. It might be adequately done so that after it's primed, it doesn't show. Yeah, it was just a way easier process. The model building was a way easier process back when I was a kid than it is now, because I just didn't pay attention to things like seams and painting and detail or anything like that. But since they went through the trouble of putting little astronaut figures in the kit, I might as well spend a little bit of time trying to get the detail done. Even if it's not historically accurate. I printed out some pictures of Armstrong's moon suit. The Smithsonian has it now, and they published some pictures of it. And this isn't it, but I can use it as a color guide. like the painting guide says, paint the whole thing white except for the strap for the camera, and paint that light blue. But in fact, the boots, the bottoms of the boots, not the whole boot, but just the soles, and the gloves were kind of a light gray color. The connectors were painted bright blue and red, and they're not in the right place, but I'll paint them anyway, as much as I can. Let's see, why is there shouldn't be a seam here, because that's not where the halves came together. But it looks like, as I'm rotating this, it looks like there's it's a pocket. It's a pocket. It's a feature, a pocket on the leg. So yeah, I'm gonna mess around with this and try to get, even if it's not historically accurate, at least some of the detail highlighted, so that it's not just painted white and disappear. The inside of the leg, okay now. It certainly looks better than it was before I noticed that I hadn't done anything with it. Thank everybody for their patience in watching me just file away at this little astronaut figure. So I try to make it look okay. I'm really kind of happy that the original moon suit was all just fabric, because being fabric, I don't have to worry about surface texture distortions caused by the filing. Okay. Because this makes it not as smooth as the original plastic, because it's not going to matter, because the whole thing is actually kind of matte. Is this excess cement that oozed out here? There's a really weirdly glossy part here, and shouldn't be there. Because that surface texture the glossy surface texture will actually be out of place. Look like a little cement oozed up through the seam. Well, these came out when I first pieced these together, test fit all of this stuff. I was really dismayed. But they have come out much better in terms of open seams and misfitting than I thought they would. They're not A quality. Keep grading my modeling skills here, and I'm shooting for a solid B on this model. So far, I think I'm coming close to hitting that mark. These particular figures were definitely not A quality figures, but they are coming out. They are coming out as an adequate B level figure, I'm pretty sure. So, using spackling compound, which does not give the same surface texture as the plastic, but it fills the gaps in pretty nicely. It sands well. Okay. And for this particular component, the astronauts, where the surface texture is not glossy, the difference in surface texture will not be real obvious. I don't want to put too much more on there than I need to. I want to minimize the amount of sanding that needs to be done. But I also want to make sure it fills the gap. Mind the gap, as they would say, as I've heard tell, that's what they say in the underground in London. Mind the gap, which means don't leave a big gap. Or maybe what it means is that you should watch your step because of the gap between the train and the station platform. I don't really, I shouldn't have even started because now I can't finish. I don't know what I'm talking about. It just was a phrase that came to mind as I was minding the gap here. The stuff goes on pink, which is kind of weird, and then it turns white when it dries. I don't know if that's intentional or if it's just like a quality of the material. If it's intentional, the intent would be to you can see where you're putting it, right? So you can see if you've got way too, like here where it went too far over. I needed it. It was more there than I needed, or whether it's just the material starts out pink for some reason and then turns white. There are primers, wall paint primers that do the same thing. Goes on pink, turns white. Maybe for the same reasons, which is one reason or the other, but I don't know which one. Oh, that's more than I need. There's a hole here in the boot on the outside that will definitely show, and so definitely needs to be filled in. Kind of, this is where I'm going to put more than I need because I want it to be above the sanded surface so that when I sand it, I can sand down to it. There's just a big hole there. Just a hole in the side of the boot. It sounded almost Canadian. Okay. It's a boot. Stop messing with this one. Sure that I try to remember to sand that before I prime it. I may end up priming it over the. I don't remember. I'm not going away. I'm not sure if they're even going to get primed anytime soon. Okay, this is the standing in the lem one, and it isn't so much as a problem with the figure, okay, as it is a problem with am I going to be able to install it and not have it just turn into a floppy mess. What I mean by that is that it will come detached. I don't want it to become detached after I put the two halves of the lunar excursion module together, because then it cannot be recovered. I can't put it back if it comes off. Edge, that's the ridge between the suit and the visor. I don't want it to disappear, but I also don't want it to be distorted. This guy's supposed to have the same kind of suit as the Walking on the Moon one, but it doesn't. Doesn't have the same connectors on the front at all. And it has these weird shoulder pads on it that aren't on the original. So for whatever care they took in putting this model together, the designers, they could have had designers just do the moon suits, right? Just do the space suits and say, try to make them look historically accurate, because the rest of the model, they worked at historical accuracy, I could tell. But they didn't on the suits. A little bit disappointing. I mean, I suppose somebody who's going to look at the model isn't going to notice, but because I wasn't sure how to paint them, I got pictures of Neil Armstrong's moon suit from the Smithsonian's website, And yeah, this isn't it. So it goes. Oh, we're doing it on time. I've got about a half hour. Yeah, so I'm going to finish these up and then probably not do anything of real interest or import in the last 15 minutes or so, because this will end up taking longer than I would expect. Most of what I do ends up taking longer than it probably should. And this part of the foot never came together. I can't glue it together. I'm just going to have to sand it down into shape and fill the gap. I'm curious. Someday I might even do this if I ever decide to spend some time looking at YouTube stuff, because I should watch a stream from somebody who knows what they're doing. No, I should. Now, if I did that, then I would just be disappointed in what we're doing here. What I was muttering about, what I decided not to follow up on, was there are people who have like big modeling workbenches with ventilation and lights and materials and hands that work. And I could watch one of those and just learn some things about what to do. But what would be the point in that? This stream then would lose its unpredictability, and in some ways its purpose, which is to be, which is to be watching a model being made by somebody who's really not very good at it, but no claim to being an expert in any way. But it might be fun to listen in on ranting about internet-enabled refrigerators. Yeah, that might be. You might enjoy that. You never know. And the model itself, the process of putting it together is kind of interesting to watch. Especially good. Well, I would say that this stream would have two distinct audiences. One would be if a person was in fact a master modeler, really good at what they were doing, knew what they were doing, had the tools, had the skills, that sort of thing. It might be kind of fun to watch somebody who didn't. There could be a source of amusement. Like, this is what they should be doing. I wonder if they will. Nope, they didn't do it the way they should. That's how it. It turned out okay anyway. That's a shock. Or yeah, I knew that was going to happen because they should have done this or this. So I think if somebody were really a master modeler, that this stream would be kind of amusing, and they could compare what they would do and what a skilled person would do to what actually happened. And be amused by the oops or the surprise that in fact something worked out, even though it was done like just the totally wrong way. So that's one potential audience. The other is an audience that really doesn't know any of that and would just say, what's happening here, it's working. Stuff's getting done and it looks okay. And, if this person can do it, I could probably do it. I might even give it a try. Probably, with the same frustrations and skill level and everything. And if they're just a real casual model builder who wanted to make something that they would just enjoy for themselves and they wouldn't charge hundreds of dollars to somebody for a display model kind of thing, they might enjoy watching this because then they could see trial and error sometimes. oh, that didn't work, or I'm thinking of doing it this way, and oops, once I test fit the parts, that's not going to work. You would kind of emulate their own model building lack of experience. That might be another audience. Somebody might just like to hear about somebody ramble on about the how they think that internet-enabled refrigerators are just not a good use of time and material. That could be another potential. There's lots of potential audiences, right? So far, I've probably described like dozens of people worldwide who might fit into those categories, who might want to watch this stream. There might be people who really like Dungeons and Dragons, and they might come on and chat about. We've had some people come on and chat about they're trying to put together a campaign, or trying to develop a character for a campaign that they're getting into. And because I know a little bit about Dungeons and Dragons since I started playing it when it first came out in the 1970s, okay, I can help on, and also sometimes other members of Dice and Dungeons are in on chat, and they could help out too. So that's another potential audience. So if you or anybody you know falls into one of those potential audiences, yeah, come on in. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays most of the time, but not next Monday. From about 10 until 2, and watch relaxing or not relaxing, or just plugging along trying to get a model built painting with Dice and Dungeons. And if you know about Dungeons and Dragons and like it, or don't and would like to know more about it, you can catch our Dungeons and Dragons show, which is an excellent Dungeons and Dragons show that streams with a live chat on Sundays at 2 and is replayed endlessly on YouTube and as a podcast. I guess endlessly is correct. I can say that. You can catch them and watch them at your leisure. That gap isn't nice. Think about that. I'm looking at the space between the shoulder and the torso here, and it's supposed to be an opening, I think. Not really open. I'm not sure what I can do about opening it after it's primed. I might be able to see it better. Okay, well, this one is coming out. It's coming out kind of okay. I mean, it's not bad. Better than, again, a lot of this is just turning out to be a little bit better than I thought it would be, given how badly these pieces were molded to begin with and how poorly they fit. But with some oozing some excess cement to fill in the gaps, and some clamping with a lot of alligator clips and some clothespins. For the most part, it's actually not too bad. The feet are a problem. The feet on this one are a problem, as well as they were on some of the other astronaut figures. So I'll be putting a little bit more spackling on these feet also. And then try to remember, not the song. I can't remember what musical that came from. Try to remember, and then I can't remember. Is that irony or just dumbness? I don't know. Yeah. So try to remember that I use filler on these, and that I need to finish sanding it before I prime it. Toothpick again. Yeah, this toothpick's about had it. Still not I guess, if a part of the model is going to not work, it might as well just be the feet, right? Because most people aren't going to be checking out the shoes. Is that a thing where you say, "Who are you wearing?" Do you say that about shoes? I don't really know. There's lots of brands of shoes that I have no familiarity with, that some of which are incredibly expensive. It's not something I'm really in tune with. I buy new shoes like every 8 years or something. Just hardly ever. Necessary. Okay? Like if my work shoes fall apart so much that when I work in them, they're not covering my feet, right? That's a problem then. Then it becomes a safety issue. Or, my spouse says, "I'm embarrassed to see you to be with you in public if you wear those shoes." That's usually a hint. The "I will not be seen with you in public if you wear those shoes" is a subtle hint that maybe it's time to get new shoes. And it's not just because they're out of style. It's just because they're like so beat up that it's really obvious that they're beat up. I had a pair of those once. They kind of broke through on their toe. They were really comfortable. I hated to give them up. They were very comfortable walking shoes. But it was also pretty obvious that they had failed to fully contain my feet. Even I became embarrassed to be seeing myself in public wearing those shoes. So they went away, and I bought new ones. Guy has really badly swollen ankles. That's not a feature of the suits in the picture, but it is the way the model shows it. So there it is. Okay, let me we do some filling in the gaps in the feet here. This toothpick's about ready to be retired, it looks like. Fill in the gaps, and then after this hardens, I can sand it down and contour it, which is kind of hard to do right now because the gaps are not filled in. On the outside of the foot, so it really shows. You can really see the flaw there. This one's right on the top. It's kind of easy to fill in, but it's pretty obvious that it's there. So besides being pink, the other thing that there's advantages and disadvantages to this using spackling compound to do this. One is that it does dry hard enough to sand, which is not like some of the others. There's one that fills the gaps really well, but it doesn't harden, or at least it doesn't harden within like 4 days. Maybe it does if it just sits for a week. I don't know. I never gave it that long. But it doesn't harden, and so it doesn't sand. It stays kind of jelly like, and so pulls away. So instead of sanding, it just peels off. Another one dissolves the plastic, and that isn't very helpful, because then you end up with this boot. I'm putting extra on this because this boot is kind of like separated there, and it needs to fill in and then be contoured. Okay, so I just need to remember to go back and sand down the boots of these guys, the standing guys. Well, all of them probably, just to be sure. And then this is just trash. And this is filthy. It needs to be cleaned up. Okay, let me move these over. These are little astronaut guys. They probably should have stayed on camera. It would have been more interesting. Then you could look at the little astronaut guys while I was playing around with the files here. So these little astronaut guys are going to get primed, and then their seams will be checked once again to find out whether they need to have any more filling or sanding, like if the seams are showing too much. And then if they are, then they'll be primed again. They'll be reprimed. Then I'll put it in a box over on the side here, and I managed to just pick the one that isn't the right one. They got their thumbs showing here. The thumbs are sticking out. That's kind of funny. Is that? Oh my. Okay, I'm glad I looked at that. There's a divot in the top of this guy's glove. One of those mold flaws. I wonder if it shows up on the others. There. I was just looking at it, and the light was reflecting on the hand, and it's like the whole top of his hand. I can say him because there were no women astronauts at the time. Has a divot in it. So I'm going to fill that in with this plastic putty. Plastic putty with a spackling compound. With this pink stuff, I'm going to fill it in with this pink stuff. And hopefully I will remember to sand that down, because it's going to turn white. If it stayed pink, I would remember it for sure. But when it turns white, I won't know. I'm going to look at the other guys. But that was really weird looking, and it would show. I mean, it would be a clear flaw after this was put together, to have basically a divot in the top of its hand, because these guys sit, and you can see them. They sit with their heads toward the window, kind of. On all of them, not quite as visible as on that one, but it's pretty clearly just a consistent flaw in the manufacturing. Is that the left hand of the seated astronaut has a divot in it. Great. So I caught that in time. And that's the kind of thing I'll see after they're primed as well, is whether or not there's just kind of weirdness, weird things showing where they shouldn't. All right. Time to start wrapping up here. I will explain once again that Dyson Dungeons is all about Dungeons and Dragons, and we have an excellent Dungeons and Dragons show that streams with a live chat on Sundays, 2:00 Eastern time, currently Eastern Daylight Time, U.S. time, and then can be seen at any time. Can't tell if that's a problem or not. We'll see what it looks like after it's primed. Looks like there's some problems with the glove there and the fingers. It can be seen on any time at YouTube or listened to as a podcast, and I would encourage anybody and everybody to check those out. If you can't catch it with the live chat, then it's great. You just go on YouTube and pick an episode and watch it, and I think you will find it to be actually quite enjoyable. I need to pay attention to the bottoms of the feet, these things. The bottoms of the feet show. That will be an issue because the bottoms of the feet are pretty distorted. Let me look. Sorry, I just got distracted by reality here as I was doing a plug for our D&D show. Anyway, yes, catch our Dungeons and Dragons show. It is really cool. It is a lot of fun to produce, and it's actually a lot of fun to watch because I've watched ourselves a couple of times, and we are entertaining. Seriously, we are. It's a neat thing to do. Okay, so they sit in these couches, and it goes there, and that's the... So it looks like the hatch is over their heads. So it looks like the bottoms of the feet are not going to show, which is a good thing because, let's just say it's a good thing because they don't show that well. When the windows are all on the hatch side. So looking in, and there's a window in the hatch, looking in, it's all where their heads are. So it makes sense that their heads would be where the windows are, doesn't it? That does make sense. So there. And I have a whole rant about the instrument panel that I will save until Wednesday, and maybe even later because I'm not working on the command module until the end. Okay. So there. Sorry, I got distracted. I needed to find out about the feet. So anyway, catch our Dungeons and Dragons show. Please do that. It's really worthwhile. It's a lot of fun to produce. It's a lot of fun to watch. It's a lot of fun to listen to. If you have been watching this stream, thank you for becoming a follower. I appreciate the new follows. Please tell other people about this. It's, if you just like listening to this sort of thing, because you never know what I'll end up talking about, or, it's quiet and calm, and it's PG rated. It's not even PG-13. It's actually PG rated, so you can even let your kids listen to it. I don't know. I think that they would appreciate hearing about the foibles of internet-enabled refrigerators, but I don't know. Maybe if they were older, like 10 or 14 or something, they might find that amusing, especially if they've got one at home and they found out that it just keeps ordering milk for them and nobody in the house drinks it. That would be a nice growing up experience. So I will be back on Wednesday because I won't be here on Monday, and not being here because I won't be here, I won't be able to do the stream. If I were here, I would, but since I'm not going to be here, I can't, and so I won't. And then I will be back on Wednesday, and maybe these guys will be primed by then, maybe not, but I'm not going to be working on them anyway. I'm going to be working on... Let me bring it over. I'll show you a preview of what I will be wearing. You're not, guys. I'm going to be working on the Lunar Excursion module. Not only all of these parts, but all the little parts that I've broken off and are safely stored in this container so that they don't get lost. Yep. So these guys need a little bit more sanding, which I may or may not remember to do anytime soon. Probably I'll just wait until next Wednesday, and then I'll prime them after that. And I won't be getting back to the astronauts for a while because I'll be working on the LEM. And what I mean by working on means that I'll be taking these parts off of the trees where they're still attached. And because that always leaves a piece of plastic behind, I'll be spending some time filing and sanding them down and then making sure that they fit. And the first things I'll probably work on, I'm going to work on the ascent stage first. All of this stuff is the descent stage, which is a lot more complicated and involves more parts. What I'll be working on are the brackets, these things here, and the nozzles for the attitude control jets. They're tiny, but they end up taking a huge amount of time in order to get them right. So I do want to get them right. So I will be taking these off the trees, gluing them together, getting rid of, filing down the seams, taking these off, getting rid of the sprue marks, painting them inside and out, finding out where this goes, doing some parts testing and shape and testing and seam correcting where necessary, and then getting this ready for assembly. And at some point along the way, I will be making a decision about whether to install the lunar excursion module. There, I'll show you. See the LEM astronaut? Standing up LEM astronaut goes in like this, and you can see them. You can see them through the window. Yeah. There's the astronaut looking through the window. And it would be, I'd like to be able to do that. I'd like to be able to have this astronaut standing there. But I'm really concerned there's no good place for them to be. Put them there in the middle, but I'm concerned that they won't. Adhere to the base adequately when I'm manipulating it and rotating it and dropping it. I probably will drop it more than once in the whole process of priming and painting and seam removing and attaching little bits like these things. So I'll have to decide. The LEM might not have a standing astronaut. It just might not happen. The alternative, like I'd mentioned before, this is probably not a good alternative because I don't think it'll fit. Well, it does. The alternative, this would be kind of interesting, is to wait until this whole thing is done, right? Not install the hatch until it's done, which I could potentially do. I could wait and install that until later, and then put the astronaut in with some tweezers, put a whole lot of like cement on the bottom of its feet, insert it after this whole thing is painted and prepped, and glue it down that way. I mean, that's just so outrageous that I might just end up trying to do that. That would be a thing, right? And if it didn't work, then it didn't work. It's just sort of the way it goes. And I'd have to do that before the hatch was installed, because the hatch is closed, which it should be. If you're out orbiting the moon, you would definitely want your hatch closed. So the docking hatch that goes on here, okay, would not be installed until this whole thing were assembled and painted and judged to be complete, except maybe for the application of the attitude control rockets. And then I would grab this guy with, I've got some tweezer sorts of things that are spring-loaded. To release them, I could grab its head and maneuver it into position and install it after it was all done, like the very last thing. I might plan to do that just as a thing to be entertaining, because I know I don't want to do it before I assemble this, because this whole thing's going to be moving around way too much, and there's no way that it's going to stay in place, and that wouldn't be nearly as much fun to watch. So on Wednesday, I'm going to finish off these guys, double check the seams and everything to make sure that they're adequate, and then I'll prime them on Wednesday night or Thursday or something, and maybe even start. I might prime them. I think I'll do that. I think between Wednesday and Friday, I'll prime them and then also paint them. The primer will be white. The final paint will be white. So they'll be done except for like the detail painting for the gold color on the screen on their helmet visor, and the detail on the connectors for the various hoses, and the camera, which is on its chest. It's like a dash-mounted camera kind of thing. We'll see that. After I prime them, I'll check the seams to see if they need additional work or not. I might do that, I might not. It might just go on for longer while I work on the LEM. I know these bits, just these little bits here alone, the brackets and the nozzles, that's going to take an entire stream, because I've done something really similar with the service module, and it took an entire stream to just get these things ready to be done. These would be cemented and then primed after they were cemented and the seams were worn down. Yeah, and then the cutting out and installation of the windows will be another process. They need to go in here and put in place and held firmly. I'm not sure how, with what adhesive yet. And then I need to very carefully mask them after they've been installed, so that none of the paint from the priming and painting process gets on. So that's the kind of stuff that'll be happening next week. This is going to take actually quite a while to get done, but the LEM it's a really cool part of the model. The escape tower and the service module, I built those first because they were kind of straightforward, even though they had their own challenges. But the LEM is going to be a more complicated thing. And then the command module isn't all that complicated to put together, but it is not well formed. The control panels are really disappointing, and I'm going to have to decide what I'm going to do about trying to get detail done on the control panels. So here, I want to put these little astronaut guys in here, inside the descent stage fairing, okay, so that they're in a place, and I can find them later. Cover this up. Say thank you all for watching. Please become a follower. If you go on to YouTube, I think you can become a sponsor. And there's always patreon.com/diceanddungeons, patreon.com/diceanddungeons. And you, among others, can become a patron of the show. You can help me pay for paint and toothpicks. But also, more importantly, you can help support the Dungeons and Dragons campaign that we stream Sundays at 2, and that you can catch up with on YouTube and as a podcast. I am, I'm done for the day. I will see you all again next Wednesday, where I will then plunge into the Lunar Excursion module, known as the LEM, despite the fact that this thing that I'm going to read, the Apollo story, says that it's called the Bug. We never called it the Bug. We called it the LEM, even though the abbreviation was LM, not LEM, because it's a lunar module. But it's hard to say LM and much easier to say LEM. But that's a story for another day. I always have a last-minute ramble. I'm going to stop. I'm just going to say thank you and see you next week.